Progress.
At organizing this webinar. And of course, my special thanks go to three of our distinguished alumni, Todd Saleka, Steve Samuels, and Stephen Stabile, to be here tonight to share with you the expertise on personal finance. So the topic tonight is personal financial goals, and the ability to get, keep, use, and grow your own money. It is often called financial literacy, right? It gives us more power and give us more choices as individuals. In the current economy, people get student loans to support their education, save for their own retirements, get the capital to support their own businesses, etc. So in these cases, a variety of financial risks have shifted to individuals. It's really important to understand and be able to manage these financial risks. So to empower ourselves to make good, rational decisions about our money, we need information and advice. We need knowledge and skills. We need to plan ahead as early as possible. And that's why we are here tonight. So the panelists are going to share with us their expertise and advice. I very much look forward to the upcoming presentations and discussions. Thank you. Joe, yours.
Yep, thank you for the wonderful introduction, and thank you everyone for letting us join today at your school. My name is Joe Lorenzano, and I work on the Barrington Education team. We have some great guest speakers from the wealth management industry, and thanks to their philanthropic support, you now have the Barrington Education program that is at your school completely complimentary. I'm going to go through a few slides about the Barrington Education program and then pass it on to our two featured guest speakers to talk about personal finance. So with that being said, I'm going to dive into the presentation and then introduce Stephen and Todd as well to talk about personal finance. So as I said, I'm Joe Lorenzano, the account manager for the Barrington Education program. While I'm presenting, if you have any questions in regard to the program, please do not hesitate to reach out. And then just a reminder now, if you do have any questions yourself during the presentation, there's that Q&A function on the bottom. So whether it's about Barrington Education or anything Stephen and Todd goes over, please use that Q&A, because at the last 10 to 15 minutes, we'll save some time for students to ask questions of what we go over. So just a little background on Barron's and where we fit into the industry. News Corp is a giant multimedia company. Underneath it is Dow Jones, which we are all employed by. And underneath it, you might see some other familiar companies like MarketWatch, Wall Street Journal, which is WSJ, Factiva, maybe even HarperCollins. But what we're talking about today is Barron's, and even more specifically, Barron's.com, which you now all have complimentary access to. So why Barron's, which is what we're talking about today? So Barron's is a premier financial magazine, which you can read online with the subscription you now have access to. It's a trusted financial publication where our readers are successful in global business. And as you can see, there's some stats on the bottom, but I just wanted to go over why Barron's is important for your school life, your work life, and even your future and investing life. So when reading Barron's in the classroom, it will enrich your understanding of business, finance, and enables you to participate in more forcefully discussions and draft more substantial papers in your classroom. When reading Barron's in your career, you'll be training your vocabulary of Wall Street and broadening your understanding of how corporations and capital function. When reading Barron's in investing, you understand how to make investments work. And when you do have the money or the funds to invest, you'll be able to do so more profitably. So if you are interested in a career in finance or business, I do highly recommend that you start reading Barron's and digesting our content. When you begin your transition out of college into the finance world or business world, the people that you'll be interviewing with, the people that you'll be working with, your fellow colleagues do all know Barron's, they do read Barron's. So if you're able to start digesting the content at the age that you're at now, you'll definitely be in better shape for when you transition out of college into your work life. So our vision and the program, as you can see on the right, this is in fact a three-way partnership. You do have three great alums that are helping support this program, which is another great benefit. And really the vision of this program is to connect business with academia to enhance financial literacy and proficiency, aiding the development of the next generation of business leaders and advisors. So that is all of you, the students, you all listening in. So as you see on that diagram, you're all in the middle, and through this program, it's completely complimentary. Barron's is typically, if you're a student, you can get it for around $50 to maybe $100 a year with the promotions that we send out a lot. If you're not a student, it is around $250 a year subscription. So through this program, It is completely complimentary, so we highly recommend you take advantage of it. And I know I keep mentioning the program, so here's a quick little overview of everything that comes with it. So it is a whole experiential learning program, and I like to say that when you unlock or sign up for your complimentary subscription, you kind of unlock the whole experiential learning program. So the first, which you can see on the right, is digital access to Barron's.com. So anything you can get in those paid subscriptions, you can get with these Barron's subscriptions. There's the Barron's Weekly Review, which is for if any faculty are listening in. This is a way that we bring 5 to 6 stories right into the classroom that faculty can then use with their students to bring in real world content. We have questions based from intermediate all the way to advanced. And then obviously, if you sign up for your subscription, you can then assign this to your classmates. So if any faculty member listening in is not signed up for this, please let me know and I'd be happy to sign you up for it. We also have guest speakers and webinars available from Barron's and Dow Jones. So exactly what we're doing here today. We also have national webinars that if you sign up, you have the ability to join those as well. We do help with connecting with career services for Dow Jones recruitment teams for internships or job opportunities. We do also have a visit to our headquarters, which is something we dearly miss. This has been on pause due to the pandemic, but when we're back in business and we're ready to open those doors up, if your school does take any trips to New York City, the Barron's newsroom is more than happy to open up our doors as well, where we can really have a nice custom speaking workshop. We bring in some editors from Barron's, potentially the Wall Street Journal, as we're all under the same building. And it's a really nice way to kind of bring the students to see what the newsrooms look like. And like I said, this is on pause, but we are looking to open this up in the fall and we'll keep your school posted. And then last but not least is the student ambassador opportunities. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. Real quick, here's the portal that anything you need in regard to Barron's education you could find. So simply maybe take a picture of this, screen share it, but anything in regard to the program can be found on this website. Our national webinars, internships, and job opportunities, any PDFs to help promote the program is all on this website. And then here, the last slide is the Student Ambassador Program. So right now we do not have students represented, but if anyone is interested, we can have up to 5 students. And this is really a way to build a professional relationship with us at Barron's. You are able to help maximize the program at your school, making sure your fellow students and faculty are signed up for the subscription. And then kind of the perks of it is that we do create a professional recommendation for you. This is great to add onto your resume, especially if you're interested in a career in finance or business. When you eventually take on internships or job opportunities, that Barron's student ambassador, I'm sure the people in the industry will kind of see that word Barron's and kind of ask you more about what you did. And it's a kind of a great way to separate you from your fellow students. Here's just a quick overview of all the schools in the program, which is a fairly new program. We started with 0 schools about 4 years ago. We're now at 120 plus schools across the country, 170,000 students participating. You can see your school right in the middle, SUNY Albany, accompanied with a bunch of other schools across the country, state schools, private schools, cadets at the Virginia Military Institute. So again, a lot of different schools, and you're accompanied with a lot of schools. Love to have even more. So again, you're in good company. And with that being said, I don't want to take up too much time because I do want to introduce Stephen and Todd as the featured guest speakers. And with their support, Todd and Steve, thank you, because without their support, this program would not be at your school. And thank you so much for joining us today. And with that being said, Todd and Stephen, if you could do a quick introduction, and then we'll dive into the presentation that we have.
Yeah, so I guess I'll jump in here. First and foremost, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be back and pay it forward to SUNY. But let me take a second and plug Barron's, right? So for anyone pursuing a Wall Street career, or anyone that just literally wants to stay in tune with current events and investment events, you have to read it. It's once a week. For me now, it's a bit over 20 years to date myself, but getting Barron's every Saturday morning. No fake news in there. It's all good. It's all relevant, and I make it a habit. I even listen to it now. So I'll tell you, one of my favorite podcasts is one of the reporters or journalist, Jack Howe, and it's super witty, super light, and super informative. So make it a habit. It's free. but spend a few hours a day, listen to their podcast. I promise you it's good stuff. And, you'll sound pretty informed and smart, especially when you start to go on interviews. So we wanted to kick it off by just sharing, what was the interest that we had, or how do we end up, becoming into the wealth management industry? And I'll take mine back to, I'm a child of 79, but to the 80s and 90s. And I was a crazy basketball fan. So just remember that these were the good old days of basketball. You had Jordan, you had Malone, Stockton, Ewing, you had, Larry Bird, Johnson, you had all the great players, right? And one morning, my father, very blue collar guy, he's sitting there reading the New York Post, and I see this page in between the post as he's flipping through, probably the sports section, but it has all this fine little print. And I said, "What is that?" And he said, "These are all the stocks on the New York Stock Exchange." And again, remember, this is, some point in the late 80s, and there's not even like America Online, right? So this is where you found the price of your investments, based on the prior day's close, right? So he kind of explained it to me. These are companies, you can invest in them, and this is, the price of each one. And the one thing he did, he said, "Pick two." I said, "Pick two." He said, "Pick two companies." And so I start to look at this fine print. I have big glasses on then, just like I have now, except a smaller body. And I come up, my first pick is a company called Lotus, or Lotus Notes. And for no particular reason besides the fact that I've seen a commercial on TV, probably during my cartoons. The second one was actually intuitive. I said, "Dad," I said, "Nike." I said, "Michael Jordan. I wear Air Jordans." I said, "Does Nike have a company?" Right? Simple question for probably a 9-year-old. Do they have a company? Of course they are a company. And he said, "Yes, they're a stock." So I picked Nike and I picked Lotus. Every single day I go and I start to check just to see where the price ended up. For the most part, Nike kept going up. One day Lotus disappears, and I said, "Dad, I looked at all 2,000 of these companies with a magnifying glass. Where is Lotus?" And we did some homework, and IBM bought them. So my first stock pick was an M&A deal, and it made lots of money that I didn't invest at the time, but definitely got my interest. And the second company, Nike, they did okay. It turned out to be a pretty good company. So for this meeting, I looked up, had I put $100 in Nike at the time, what would it be worth right now? And that $100 that I didn't have would be worth $91,000. So Nike outperformed the S&P and was up almost 18% a year since 1980. So that's what got me involved. Todd, how about yourself? What was your interest?
Todd, I think you're on mute.
I think you're on mute.
You could buy a heck of a lot of Air Jordans for $91,000. I'll tell you that. That would be nice. My first memory is actually a little bit different. It's not a stock memory. It's a strange one. So when I was 10, I grew up in Schenectady. I had 5 paper routes, and I was making money. And I'd get this cash, and I'd buy stuff. And I'm a 10-year-old kid running around Schenectady. And my mom comes to me, and she says, "Hey, Todd, what do you want for Christmas?" And I was making money at 10. And I said, there's this little newsstand that I sell my extra papers to on Sundays in particular. And there's this magazine. It's called Money Magazine. I don't even think it exists anymore, but back then that was like the thing. And I said, "I want a subscription to Money Magazine." And I'm not kidding when I say it at 10 years old. And I was not a great student. So it wasn't like I was some, academia that was, reading, the encyclopedia here. I was just getting by, but I loved it. And Money Magazine was my start. I started reading about investing and companies and this thing called the stock market and how you can actually own a company like Nike. And it was fascinating to me. And that started my trend to where, so Stephen, we're both from the 70s. You're on the better part of it with the 9 versus the 0. But when I started my first real job at the Desmond in Albany, which is now a Crown Plaza, I was 17 years old, and they had a 401k. And I'm like, I've been reading about this for like 7 years. And that's when I started investing and maximizing my 401k when I was making $6 an hour. It's paid its rewards.
Todd, for a sec, let's just talk about this, but and maybe we're doing a little pivot here, but I can't help it. I had a paper route too. I only had one route, but we were kind of like OG entrepreneurs, right? You had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning or whatever time, go deliver the newspapers. On Saturdays, you had to put them together, right, for the big Sunday paper. You had to go around and collect. Maybe you got $1 as a tip, right? And the more customers you signed up, the more money you made. So I think having a paper route was like the most foundational entrepreneurial aspect of my life. And I'm sure you would say the same.
Yeah, I mean, you think about what we do today, you and I both, right? We go out, we attract clients that want to invest their money with us. The more we have, there is no limit to how many we can have. It really comes down to work and pushing your agenda. So we started out as newspaper boys, and here we are today as financial advisors. I'm not pedaling a bike around anymore, which is great. I'm sitting in my office. But yeah, it is. I mean, this entrepreneurial spirit that the U.S. has had for our entire lifetimes, it's not gone away. It's front and center, and it's something that should be embraced. And I think you find a lot of advisors like us have similar stories of where we started.
Yeah, before we jump into some of the meat and potatoes here, I had a client that said to me, can my daughter be a client as well? And I said, of course. And he's like, she's making pretty good money now. And I said, wait, your daughter's in high school? Well, I'm thinking folding T-shirts, right? Like things that I did. And he's like, no. He's like, she's an influencer on TikTok. And I said, oh, okay, that's cool. And yeah, she's making almost $1 million a year, and she's 18. So anyway, just a story about being an entrepreneur. You and I slung newspapers. There's people on social media, and it's a new world, same concept. Let's talk about debt. Right? Because I'm sure, although at Albany it's a great value, right? So an Albany student has less debt than, say, I don't know, a Villanova student, right? Just based upon the tuition. But there's always the talk about good debt, bad debt. Is all debt good? Is all debt bad? I know even generationally we think about debt differently, but how do you think about debt when you talk to your clients? And is there such thing as good and bad debt?
Yeah. So listen, there's two sides to the ledger on every balance sheet, right? The fun side to talk about is the investments. You own Nike stock, you own IBM, you own a mutual fund or an ETF. The more boring side, but critical, is the other side of the balance sheet, which is your leverage. So when you think about debt, there's bad debt, right? Credit card debt. We all know the stats. If you read it, if you borrow $1,000 or spend it on your credit card and you don't pay it off, it takes you like $5,000 to pay off that original $1,000 of purchases. That's terrible. People carrying interest rates at 12, 15, 20%. We don't want that kind of debt. We want debt that equates to something that is beneficial. So, for example, college debt. If you look at the average numbers out there and you say, what does a college graduate earn on average versus someone who didn't go to college? Well, you can certainly justify that college debt is good debt. You expend a certain amount of dollars and what you get back is a reward of higher income. Mortgage debt's very similar, right? If you buy a house, you can largely deduct the mortgage interest on your tax return, longer term, and you own the house. Now, ultimately, at the end of the day, what we would say as advisors is most people don't want any debt. But it's unreasonable to think about, if the average home in the U.S., the average single family home is over $400,000 now, it's going to be really hard for somebody 25 or 30 years old, unless they're TikTok influencers, to go and write a check for $400,000. So that's where you need debt. And what you always want to think about, though, is what's the end game, right? I hate it when I see people that are running their credit cards up and they're saying, oh, I'll just deal with it next year. No, you really want to start. The biggest single debt you should have is the debt to yourself. You cannot afford to not pay yourself first. And that's a kind of a strategy that we've looked at over time, which what I mean by that is when you get that first job, it's interesting. I talked to my cousin yesterday. It's actually a generation down, but she just got her first job. And I said, what's the match? And she said 3%. And I can afford that. And I said, good. She's just college grad, right? Start out with your 3% match and then do an escalator every year. I want you to increase that to 4%, 5%, 6% till you get to the max. You won't even miss it. So, the investment side is more fun to talk about, but the debt side's critical. And we also want to make sure when it comes to debt, establish your credit, right? Get some credit, because if you show up for that first major purchase and the bank pulls you and all they see is a blank slate, right? You've never had a credit card, you've never had a debit card, you don't have a bank account. It's going to be hard for you to secure a loan, a lot harder than it should be. So you can do it while you're in college, charge everything you can to get your points and pay off that credit card debt #1 every month. And when you're done with school and you look at the pyramid, remember, debt's a pyramid, right? Stack it. The highest interest is on the top. Then you've got, that's usually credit cards, and you've got things like student loans in the middle, maybe mortgage at the bottom. Chip away top down, right? Always pay that highest debt off first. So that's a little bit about how we think about debt. And I guess, Stephen, I'm going to kick it back to you, because one of the other things with interest rates, we're hearing an awful lot of chatter these days about inflation and what inflation is going to basically do to the world, and what it's also going to do to things like, should I rent or buy? Should I have, certain real estate positions in my portfolio? Inflation's a real issue today. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and how it ties into this piece.
Yeah, thank you. So before I go there, I just want to share an idea. And so 2 years ago, I had my identity stolen, which is terrible, right? And they ran up debt. They wrecked my credit. It's still haunting me. So everybody takes cyber pretty seriously. If you could sign up for a free service or something that monitors your debt eventually and your credit when you have it, please do it, because I can tell you firsthand, it is the most uncomfortable feeling. Somebody created a fake driver's license. Just recently, another Manhattan mini storage. Somebody opened up a mini storage, a Verizon accounts, everything. It's just like a second job trying to clean it up. And I was probably a little bit loose with my information or got hacked, who knows. But anyhow, I had to proactively work with the credit agencies to fix my credit and get it back to where it was. And in the process, learned a lot. And one little hack, I probably shouldn't use the word hack, but a debt financial hack is that if you pay your credit card balance above the amount you owe, and let's say you have a $500 balance and you pay $501, it's actually a booster to your credit. And then the second thing is, as you start to develop what we call a credit history, it's exactly what it sounds like, your history. I would recommend that you ask for more, and not ask for more to use more, but there's something called debt utilization. And so if your first credit card, you're approved for $2,000, right? Or 1,000 or whatever the heck it is, and you have a history of paying, and then you get your first job and you have more income and you update them, call them up and ask for 5,000. A, it's nice to have just that security there, but B, if you're not using your credit card, or if you're using even a little bit on a $5,000 limit versus $1,000, your debt utilization, right, the denominator's bigger, is better, your credit score goes up. So just a little idea there. Okay, mortgages. I think mortgage is, when used responsibly, it's the greatest source of debt and also wealth creation, right? So let's say you borrow $500,000 at 4% in a 30-year fixed mortgage. That means you're going to pay it off in 30 years, right? And you're stretching that payment for a really long time, so it's usually a smaller payment. First and foremost, the interest that you pay the bank, the 4%, it's usually deductible, right? Which means that it lowers your taxes, meaning you keep more money that you make, right? You owe Uncle Sam less. And it's kind of the government's way of getting home ownership, because it's, when you have home ownership, it's a great creator of wealth. And so let's say that again, you borrow this $500,000 and it's a 4% a mortgage. Your mortgage payment's probably about $1,500 a month. You're building equity because you're paying down some principal and some interest every month. And as opposed to renting, where you're just paying somebody else, right? You're renting from somebody else, the money's going nowhere. You're creating equity. Now, I love numbers. So again, I ran this just to pressure test this. Let's say that home is a $750,000 home with a $500,000 mortgage, and it only grows at 3% per year. which is what homes usually grow at. Right now, inflation's crazy. So homes, went through the roof the last couple of years, right? There's big demand for homes. But let's say that 750 over 30 years grows at 3%. Your home at the end of that mortgage, when it's finally paid off, you're going to be smiling because that home is worth $1.82 million. So congratulations. By being responsible and using debt, you create a deduction, you're creating equity, you have something you can borrow against in the future if you need it. And oh, by the way, it's going up each year as opposed to rent, which is going into somebody else's pocket. A rent is good if you own the property. Rent is not necessarily great if you're the one paying it. So just a thought there. And then the other thing is, if you really think about, where we are right now, if you borrow money at the current, if you graduate tomorrow and you borrow money at 4% and inflation does stick around, interest rates are only going to be higher in the future, which means it's more expensive to buy in the future. Now, on the other hand, if interest rates come down, right, if they get lower again, what you would do is refinance your mortgage. And basically, it's an agreement, a contract with the bank. You refinance and you pay less interest because it's a lower interest rate environment. So I want to get back to retirement savings. And Todd, I think you did a pretty good job explaining it, but there's two things that I want to ask you. One is, you mentioned a match, but can you just unpack what that means? Because maybe some people don't understand what a 401k match is. And then the second thing is, how do you think about, I don't know, let's say I got my first job, like how much should I be saving percentage wise? Is there a magic number or best practice?
Yeah, there is. So let's just start with, what is a 401k, right? It's named after the tax law, tax code 401-K, and it allows you to save money with your employer. It's a pretty simple concept, and a lot of firms, especially the bigger ones, offer this as an employee benefit as a way to attract you, right? The folks on this line, they want you to come work for them. So one of the features they'll provide is, hey, if you come work for me and you make, I'm just going to make up a number, you make $50,000 a year to start. A lot of firms will say, if you forego X percentage of your salary, 3%, 5%, 6%, we'll match, maybe it's 50 cents on the dollar. So it's a pretty common one would be, you defer 6% and the firm will put in 3%. Now, think about, as we talk about investing, the single greatest rate of return you're ever going to get is your 401k match, right? Because if you put in 6 and they put in 3, you've made 50% before you've done anything. That's a really good match. So we start with that, just conceptually of what it is. Now, here's the savings rate, and this is going to scare people. All right, there used to be a rule of thumb called the 10% savings rule, which said you got to put 10% aside no matter what. Just baseline, you cannot afford to not pay yourself. The problem with that rule is that rule was back 30 years ago when many employers offered pension plans. So one of the things we would talk about was the three-legged stool, right? When you retire, where's your income come from? Pension, Social Security, and personal savings, which would be this retirement plan. Well, the pension's gone. Less than 9% of Fortune 500 companies offer a pension plan. So it's rare. Therefore, the ideal number now is not 10, but 20. And that scares people. And listen, when you start out and you're getting your first job, there's almost no one that's going to assume you're going to save 20% of your pay. But if you can save 10, you are really starting out, firing out of the gate. And Stephen, I'll kick it to you to talk maybe about the rule of 72 and what that compounding would look like if you could actually kick in 10% of your pay.
Ooh, I love compounding. So yeah, I'm going to jump into that too. But it's funny that something that you shared made me think about something that I learned from my wife. So my wife is a nutritionist, and I've heard her say to her patients, like, we're working remote and there's all these Zooms, and I probably shouldn't have been listening in, but she would always say, what would your future self want you to do? And she's talking about, health, right? Like you're 45 now, you're 55. What would your 65 or 75 self want you to do, right? Eat more salads maybe, right? Or whatever it may be, right? And so I tend to think the same thing financially. Like, as you think about decisions you're going to make, what would my 21-year-old self want me to do? It's consume, have fun, whatever, and that's great. But start to ask yourself, what would my 40-year-old self want me to do? What would my 50-year-old? And the answer is going to be, to Todd's point, it's save, or at least create a habit of saving. Don't just spend every penny you make, even though you really want to, right? Now, in terms of investing and compounding interest, I'll give you, just a good quote, and it's from Einstein, right? And so Einstein had said, and again, this is arguably one of the smartest humans on the earth, right, of all time, but he said compound interest is, and again, don't call me, it's the eighth wonder of the world. I think it's he who gets it, or he who understands it earns it, and he who doesn't pays it, right? So again, think about it. He who understands it earns it, meaning your money compounds and it grows, and he who doesn't pays it. So let's just explain what compounding is, just so for kind of a simple example. You invest $1,000 and it grows by 10%. The next year, let's just say you've got $1,100, right? And that grows by 10%. Now you're at $1,210, right? So on and so forth. So I've told people this in the past, we all have to work really hard to earn money. There is absolutely no doubt about it, no matter what your career is. But you have to be extremely disciplined to save it. And that's not easy either. But what is easy is letting your money compound. You're not doing the work. Nike's doing the work. The S&P 500 is doing the work. Maybe I'll go crazy and say maybe your cryptocurrency is doing the work. So think about it as a reward for all the hard work you're putting in, and that's what compounding is. And so the rule of 72 is, over 10 years, if you get 7% return, you're going to double your money, right? So compounding is so important. Another concept that I want to stress that's super important, and you'll see it pop up more and more now, but it's the concept of time in the market, meaning the stock market. The time you spend invested so you can compound is so much more important than timing the market. So timing the market, meaning picking when to buy and sell and going crazy in a stock trading account, it's a fool's game. The more time you spend in the market, the more likely you are to benefit from compounding, and the more likely your money is going to appreciate. And you're also going to avoid what? Missing the good days. The lion's share of returns of any specific company or the market in general happens on very specific days. You probably, for anybody that invests, you probably didn't want to miss Tesla today. I believe it was up over 8%, right, in one day. During the pandemic, right, if we go back to March, did anybody, including myself, think that April and May would be just some of the best months in the stock market? How could that possibly be when we're all working from home or studying from home during a pandemic? Time in the market, not timing, because timing might have led you to go into your gut, right? And let's spend a second here for any of the psych majors that are logged in, or any of the econ majors, the concept of behavior and behavioral economics, right? We are built as cave women and cave men to run from lions. Literally, it's in our DNA. You see a lion, you better believe you're running. If I see a lion in New York City, I'm getting out of Dodge. I am running. I am not waiting for that lion to eat me. And it's natural to run away when there's fear. And money is emotional. So when you have these moments, a pandemic, a financial crisis, the unfortunate conflict that's happening right now in Ukraine, these are not good moments for society. These are terrible, terrible moments. But from an investment perspective, you have to go against your instinct and start to look, because what's happening right now is that these moments make companies or investments go on sale, right? It made Apple go on sale. It made Tesla go on sale. So just always think about it and start to understand behavior, because it's not intuitive. It's actually the opposite. The way you feel usually is not a good deciding factor in whether or not to invest into markets. So compounding, extremely important. Time in the market, which builds on compounding, extremely important. And finally, be self-aware as you invest. If it feels really good and everybody's making money, And Todd, I think you have a good quote for that, which I'll ask you what you said last time. But if it feels really good, it's probably not the greatest time to put all your chips in. Conversely, when things look really challenging and companies go on sale, maybe you should in fact go shopping. So Todd, you said this last time, exception hunting. I thought it was so cool. I've never heard that before. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, and it ties into this whole thing. So, and I'm going to build right to it with this, with a real simple one. Would you pay $64 for a Starbucks coffee? You went to Starbucks today and they said, Steven, sorry, buddy, the coffee's $64 today. You'd walk away, right? Common sense.
Too cheap for that. That's
Right,
common
right.
sense. I'm too cheap to buy that coffee.
So for the students that are listening to this, right, the rule of 72, if I could earn 7.2%, which is very reasonable over the long run, on my money, a $4 cup of coffee today, in 10 years, if I invested that instead, my $4 becomes 8. In 20 years, it's 16. In 30 years, it's 32. And in 40 higher, it's 64. So the question you got to ask yourself when you're foregoing Starbucks coffee to fund your 401k is, can I get some cheap coffee at home and not pay $64 for that Starbucks? That's compounding. That's time in the market, not timing the market. Put it in the S&P and let it go. That's not exactly what you said. It's not chasing the hot dot. And the hot dot is, market's down, I shouldn't buy it, I should sell. Market's up, I should buy more. No, do the opposite. And that's where we get to the exception hunting, right? And exception hunting is this. We've all heard it. And listen, living in Saratoga County now, we got the racetrack right around the corner here, the Thoroughbreds, oldest track in the nation. And when you talk to people that go to the track, all I ever hear about is what they won. Oh, I hit this 30-to-1 shot and blah, 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 and I won $600. And I always think the same thing. That's exception hunting, right? Because if you actually looked at their total betting history over the course of a season or their lifetime, it's almost a guarantee that it's a loss. But you hear about, oh, I bought this, stable coin that went up 100x, or I bought Bitcoin in 2013, we got crypto on the screen, or I bought Amazon when it first started. And what they don't tell you is the 10 other things they bought that went to zero. So exception hunting is live and well in investing. It creates that FOMO, fear of missing out, right? Well, my neighbor bought this and the other neighbor bought this. I need to buy it too. Stick to a plan, right? There's always going to be, the person who tells you their grandfather smoked 2 packs a day and drank a quart of whiskey and lived to 100. And Steven, I don't think your wife would say that's probably in the nutritional category of good. That's exception hunting, right? Warren Buffett doesn't pay any tax. That's exception hunting. He owns a company that doesn't pay a dividend, and his entire life runs through that company. So you're right, he doesn't pay tax. That doesn't mean billionaires don't pay tax. It means Warren Buffett doesn't. So be very cautious when you hear about the next startup, the next, hot dot stock. Our view, when you start out, stick to the basics, buy the market. S&P 500, large cap growth manager, buy something that's broadly diversified and really something you think in 20 or 30 or 40 years, I can still be investing in. So that's some just general thoughts on exception hunting. You want to hit ESG here?
Yeah, I think, and I'm just looking at the clock here. ESG is a category in itself, and I'm wondering if we should maybe just gloss over, but it's the concept of investing in a way that takes into consideration environmental, social, and governance, right? How companies are structured in their boards and diversity, right? And I'm just going to make this plug for ESG investing. When I first started, ESG was considered, very, and I'll say this, very fringe in terms of the market. And people would say to me all the time, I don't care what my company does. I use my own money for philanthropy and everything else. I want my stocks to make money, right? And what the research shows is that you can do really well by investing in companies that do good. And, the simple challenge I'll have to people is, if you invest in a company that treats its employees really well, right? And that doesn't pollute too much and create, high emissions and affect climate. And oh, by the way, they don't get sued, right? They have good governance and they're diverse and their board represents what the rest of us look like in the country. And it's not just like Todd and I. Let's be clear here. What you end up finding out is that those companies actually perform a lot better when they have happy people, they do good things, and they, serve the right way. So for anybody pursuing an ESG related career, I think that's amazing. And I think we're just scratching the surface. And then from an investment perspective, yes, there is something to be said that is extremely valuable about companies that do good, that actually perform well. So the last thing I want to say is for those that are considering a career in wealth management, we are paper girls and paper boys. We are building our own business. It is extremely, extremely challenging and work intensive. But I don't think anybody that goes to SUNY is scared of working, right? Because you're some of the grittiest people out there. And what I would say is if you have an interest in becoming a financial advisor, feel free to reach out to Todd, feel free to reach out to myself, and we'll have conversations with you because it's the most rewarding career in the world and you can just change people's lives. It feels great to do what we do every single day. It's not easy, but nothing is easy. And I think it's just a wonderful place. And the last thing I will say is if your degree says psychology and it doesn't say management or finance or econ, all good. Some of the best financial advisors that I've come to know do not have finance degrees, right? So just a thought, had to plug it. But why don't we get into Q&A? And is it popping up below? How are we going to do this? Joe, do you want to fire some questions?
Yep, some questions are coming in. As a reminder, if anyone has any additional ones, use that chat function or the Q&A. And then also while we're going through this, there's a few questions about how do you sign up for the complimentary subscription. Everyone right now can simply take your phone out, scan it. If you have your school email address, which you need to have, it just brings you to another link and you can sign up for that complimentary subscription. So that was the first question. So here is a question from a student. Would you say it's better to put savings in a crypto account where you get 8% staking or keeping it in a bank making less than 1%?
Ooh, a leading question. They answer their own question with that question. I would say this, there are a lot of stablecoin accounts out there. They are basically, what they're doing is taking your deposits and allowing other investors to trade in the capital markets. Now, thus far, it's proven to be safe, right? And there hasn't been any risks. But I don't know that that market has been tested. Like if theoretically Bitcoin dropped by $15,000 tomorrow, what might happen to what is stable? So read the small print. Always know that, if interest rates are 0.25 and that's what you get in a bank, which is not good,